The storm clouds gathered over Pearl Harbor like harbingers of destiny, their dark shadows dancing across the sprawling naval base where America's brightest minds waged war with mathematics and intuition. October 1943 marked 18 months since the surprise attack that had thrust the nation into global conflict, and the scars of that December morning still etched themselves into every steel bulkhead and concrete foundation. Lieutenant Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell pressed her fingers against her temples, willing away the headache that had become her constant companion during these endless days of cryptographic warfare. The fluorescent lights in Station Hypo hummed with mechanical persistence, casting an otherworldly glow across rows of women bent over intercept sheets, their pencils scratching out the rhythms of enemy communications like some macabre symphony. At 26, Sarah possessed the kind of analytical mind that had once dissected mathematical theorems at Columbia University, with the same precision she now applied to Japanese naval codes. Her auburn hair, perpetually escaping the regulation pins, caught the harsh light as she studied the latest transmission intercepts from the Central Pacific. The war had transformed her from an academic theorist into a frontline intelligence operative, though her battlefield consisted of numbers, frequencies, and patterns instead of bullets and bombs. The teletype machine clattered to life, spitting out another stream of encrypted enemy communications. Sarah's green eyes, sharp with concentration behind wire-rimmed glasses, immediately recognized the transmission signature. This was different from the routine weather reports and supply requests that typically crossed her desk. The mathematical structure suggested something far more significant, operational. Orders that could shift the balance of power across the Pacific theater. Lieutenant Mitchell. The voice carried the authority of command wrapped in velvet, causing Sarah to look up from her calculations. Commander James Robert Harrison stood at attention beside her desk, his naval uniform crisp despite the humid Hawaiian air that seemed to penetrate every corner of the intelligence center. At 32, he embodied the transformation that war demanded. A destroyer captain reassigned to intelligence work when his analytical skills proved more valuable than his seamanship. "Yes, Commander?" Sarah's voice carried a slight tremor that had nothing to do with professional nervousness. Since Harrison's arrival at Station Hypo 3 weeks earlier, their interactions had been marked by a peculiar electricity that neither acknowledged but both felt coursing through every conversation. Harrison's dark eyes held hers for a moment longer than military protocol suggested. "Admiral Parker wants a priority analysis of the overnight intercepts. Intelligence suggests the enemy may be planning coordinated operations across multiple island groups." He paused, seeming to search for words. "I'd like you to lead the analytical team." The assignment represented a significant advancement for Sarah, recognition of her growing reputation as one of the Pacific Fleet's most intuitive codebreakers. Yet something in Harrison's manner suggested personal investment beyond professional judgment. "I won't let you down, Commander." "I have complete confidence in your abilities, Lieutenant." The formal words carried an undertone that spoke of more than professional trust. "The briefing room has been cleared for your team. You'll have access to all relevant intercept materials and analytical resources." As Harrison turned to leave, Sarah caught herself studying the line of his shoulders, the confident stride that spoke of a man accustomed to command. The war had brought together individuals who might never have crossed paths in peacetime, creating bonds forged in the crucible of shared purpose and constant danger. The briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as Sarah's hastily assembled team gathered around tables covered with intercept sheets, frequency analyses, and cryptographic worksheets. Lieutenant Mary Catherine Walsh, a former mathematics instructor from Boston, spread out the latest direction-finding reports. Ensign Patricia Ann Rogers, barely 22 and fresh from the Navy's cryptographic school, arranged the priority intercepts in chronological order. "What are we looking at?" Walsh asked, her Boston accent cutting through the humid air with characteristic directness. Sarah studied the patterns emerging from the overnight intercepts. The enemy's communications show unusual coordination between previously independent operational commands. Instead of the typical decentralized approach, someone's orchestrating activities across the entire Central Pacific region. Rogers leaned forward, her blonde hair catching the light as she traced frequency patterns with her finger. The transmission timing suggests a countdown sequence. Whatever they're planning, it's synchronized to the minute. The realization struck Sarah like a physical blow. The mathematical precision of the enemy's communications revealed not just coordination, but meticulous planning for an operation of unprecedented scope. They're not planning isolated strikes. This is a comprehensive offensive designed to overwhelm our defensive capabilities through simultaneous attacks. The door opened with military precision as Commander Harrison entered, carrying himself with the bearing of a man who understood the weight of command decisions. His presence immediately shifted the room's dynamic, professional focus sharpening as the team recognized the gravity of their discovery. "Report, Lieutenant," Harrison commanded, though his eyes held warmth when they met Sarah's. "The enemy is preparing a coordinated offensive involving at least 7 separate operational groups," Sarah explained, pointing to the frequency analysis charts. "The mathematical structure of their communications indicates synchronized timing across multiple time zones. Based on the encryption patterns and transmission schedules, I estimate they'll launch within 72 hours. Harrison studied the evidence with the intensity of a man whose decisions could determine the fate of thousands. Target analysis? The coordination patterns suggest simultaneous strikes against our advanced bases in the Gilbert Islands, Marshall Islands, and Wake Island. The goal appears to be overwhelming our defensive responses by forcing us to commit reserves in multiple directions simultaneously. The strategic implications hung heavy in the air. American forces in the Central Pacific operated on extended supply lines with limited reserves. A coordinated enemy offensive could potentially reverse months of hard-won territorial gains and leave American forces dangerously exposed. Confidence level? Harrison's question carried the weight of a commander who understood that intelligence assessments translated directly into life-and-death decisions. Sarah met his gaze directly. 92% certainty on the operational timeline, 87% on target selection. The mathematical patterns are too consistent for coincidence. The silence that followed spoke volumes about the gravity of their discovery. Harrison's expression revealed the mental calculations of a professional warrior weighing options and consequences. Prepare a comprehensive briefing for Admiral Parker. Include all supporting analysis and recommended defensive countermeasures. As the team dispersed to prepare the briefing materials, Harrison lingered beside Sarah's workstation. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken recognition of shared purpose and growing personal connection. "Your analysis may have just saved thousands of American lives," he said quietly, his voice carrying admiration that transcended professional appreciation. Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "We're all fighting the same war, Commander. I just happen to fight it with numbers instead of naval guns." "James," he said suddenly, then seemed surprised by his own informality. "When we're not in front of the team, I mean. This work we're doing, it's too important for unnecessary barriers." "Sarah," she replied, her pulse quickening at the intimacy his suggestion implied. "And you're right about the work. Every intercept we break, every pattern we decode, it brings our boys one step closer to coming home." The moment held infinite possibility until the harsh reality of war intruded in the form of an aide announcing Admiral Parker's immediate availability. As they walked toward the command briefing room, Sarah became acutely aware of James beside her, his presence both comforting and unsettling in ways that had nothing to do with military hierarchy. Admiral Robert Bull Parker commanded the Pacific Fleet's intelligence operations with the intensity of a man who understood that information represented the ultimate weapon in modern warfare. His weathered face, carved by decades of naval service, reflected both the burden of command and the sharp intelligence that had earned him his position. "Lieutenant Mitchell, Commander Harrison," Parker acknowledged as they entered his domain, a command center where maps, charts, and communication equipment created a three-dimensional representation of the Pacific conflict. "I understand you have intelligence that requires immediate attention." Sarah spread her analysis across the conference table with practiced efficiency. "Admiral, we've detected evidence of a coordinated enemy offensive scheduled to commence within 72 hours. The operation involves simultaneous strikes against multiple American positions across the Central Pacific." Parker studied the evidence with the focused intensity of a professional warrior. His questions probed every aspect of their analysis, testing assumptions and exploring alternative interpretations. Sarah found herself defending their conclusions with growing confidence, her expertise validated by the Admiral's serious consideration of their findings. "Recommended response?" Parker finally asked, his tone indicating acceptance of their assessment. "Immediate reinforcement of the identified target areas," James responded with the authority of his destroyer command experience. "Pre-positioned naval forces to intercept enemy strike groups. Enhanced reconnaissance to confirm enemy movements." Parker nodded grimly. "The problem is resources. We're already stretched thin across multiple operational areas. Reinforcing everything leaves us unable to concentrate. Force where it's most needed." The strategic dilemma reflected the broader challenge facing American forces in the Pacific, fighting a war of vast distances with limited resources against an enemy operating from interior lines. Sarah studied the intelligence patterns, searching for some insight that might tip the balance. "Admiral," she said slowly, an idea forming as she spoke, "what if we don't try to defend everything? The coordination patterns suggest their operational timeline is inflexible. If we could disrupt the timing of even one strike group, the entire coordinated effort might collapse." Parker's eyes sharpened with interest. "Elaborate, Lieutenant." "The mathematical precision of their communications indicates rigid scheduling. They're sacrificing operational flexibility for coordination. If we can force one group to delay or advance their timeline, the entire operation loses its synchronized advantage." James leaned forward, his strategic mind immediately grasping the implications. A concentrated counterattack against their most vulnerable strike group. Force them to adapt their timeline, which breaks the coordination with other groups. "Exactly," Sarah confirmed, feeling the excitement of discovery. "Instead of spreading our defenses thin, we concentrate overwhelming force against one target. Let the other attacks proceed, but ensure they arrive at defended positions without coordinated support." Parker studied the analysis with growing appreciation. "Which target offers the best opportunity for disruption?" Sarah pointed to the frequency analysis that had initially caught her attention. "The northern group heading toward Wake Island. Their communication patterns show the tightest coordination requirements. Disrupt their timeline, and the ripple effects compromise the entire offensive." The decision crystallized in Parker's expression. "Prepare operational orders for immediate transmission to Task Force 58. All available strike aircraft to concentrate against the northern enemy formation. I want that coordination broken before they reach their attack positions." As orders flowed from the command center, Sarah felt the weight of consequences settling upon her shoulders. Her mathematical analysis would now translate into combat operations involving thousands of American servicemen. The abstract world of cryptography had suddenly become intensely personal. "Lieutenant Mitchell," Parker said as the briefing concluded, "outstanding work. Your analysis may have just prevented a strategic disaster." The Admiral's praise carried the weight of professional recognition, but Sarah found herself most affected by the pride she saw in James's eyes. Their intellectual partnership had produced results that transcended their individual capabilities, creating something more powerful than the sum of their separate skills. As they walked back toward the intelligence center, James spoke quietly. Have you ever wondered what we might have been in peacetime? Before the war brought us together, the question carried implications that both attracted and frightened Sarah. Sometimes, she admitted. But then I remember that peacetime wouldn't have given us this. Whatever this is two people fighting a war together, James replied, his voice carrying certainty that made Sarah's pulse quicken. Finding something worth preserving when the fighting ends. The evening air carried the scent of plumeria and salt spray as they paused outside the intelligence center. In the distance, the lights of Pearl Harbor created a constellation of human activity against the dark Pacific waters. The same harbor that had been filled with smoke and death 22 months earlier now pulsed with the rhythm of American determination. Sarah, James said softly, using her name like a promise. When this operation concludes successfully, and it will, because your analysis is brilliant, there's something I need to tell you. Before she could respond, the urgent wail of the alert siren shattered the moment. Priority communications were incoming, requiring immediate cryptographic attention. The war had a way of interrupting personal moments, reminding them that duty demanded sacrifices of the heart as well as the body. Sadi Seat 2. Enemy signals. The next 18 hours unfolded like a carefully choreographed ballet of modern warfare, with Sarah's intelligence analysis serving as the musical score that guided American forces across the Pacific theater. From her position in the cryptographic center, she monitored the flow of intercepted enemy communications, watching as the mathematical patterns she had identified began translating into tactical reality. Task Force 58, under the command of Rear Admiral Mark Pete Mitcher, positioned itself to intercept the northern enemy strike group precisely where Sarah's analysis had predicted. The coordination patterns that had seemed so threatening when decoded as abstract mathematics now became vulnerabilities, as American forces exploited the enemy's rigid timing requirements. Contact. Report from Enterprise, reported Ensign Rogers, her voice tight with excitement. Enemy formation located bearing 027, distance 43 nautical miles. Composition matches Lieutenant Mitchell's assessment: 3 heavy cruisers, 7 destroyers, and supporting vessels. Sarah felt a mixture of vindication and anxiety as her theoretical predictions materialized into armed enemy forces. The mathematical abstractions of cryptographic analysis had become steel ships carrying thousands of men toward violent confrontation. Her calculations would determine who lived and who died in the coming battle. James appeared beside her workstation, carrying fresh intercept sheets that bore the urgent red classification markings of priority intelligence. The enemy's communication discipline is breaking down, he reported with satisfaction. As our forces engaged the northern group, their coordinated timing began falling apart. Exactly as you predicted, the intercepted messages revealed growing confusion within enemy ranks as the carefully synchronized operation encountered unexpected resistance. Commands flew between operational groups as commanders attempted to adapt their inflexible plans to rapidly changing circumstances. The southern groups are requesting permission to accelerate their attack schedules, Sarah noted, studying the latest decrypts, but the mathematical relationships show they can't maintain coordination if they break from the original timeline. Which means? James prompted, though his expression suggested he already understood the implications. They'll either maintain coordination and arrive at fully prepared defensive positions, or break coordination and attack piecemeal against concentrated American forces, Sarah explained with growing excitement. Either choice leads to defeat. The genius of her analytical approach was becoming apparent. By understanding the mathematical foundation of enemy coordination, she had identified the critical weakness that American forces could exploit. The enemy's greatest strength: synchronized precision. had become their most dangerous vulnerability. Admiral Parker's voice crackled over the communication system, addressing the intelligence center from his command position aboard the flagship. "Lieutenant Mitchell, your predictions are proving remarkably accurate. Enemy coordination is collapsing across all operational groups. What should we expect in the next phase?" Sarah studied the frequency patterns of recent enemy transmissions, searching for indications of their next move. "Admiral, the communication patterns suggest desperate attempts to salvage the operation through modified timing. I anticipate they'll try to concentrate remaining forces for a single massive strike rather than continuing with dispersed attacks." Target prediction? The mathematical relationships pointed toward one inevitable conclusion. "Our main fleet anchorage, sir. If they can't achieve their original objectives, they'll attempt to inflict maximum damage against our primary strategic asset." The prediction sent shock waves through the command structure. An enemy strike against the main fleet anchorage would threaten not just individual ships, but the entire Pacific offensive capability. Every available defensive asset would be required to prevent catastrophic losses. Recommended response? Parker's voice carried the weight of a commander facing a critical decision. James stepped forward, his destroyer experience informing his tactical assessment. Concentrated defensive coordination around the anchorage. Use their desperation against them by drawing their remaining forces into a killing zone of our choosing. Concur, Sarah added. The mathematical analysis suggests they're operating beyond their optimal coordination capabilities. Their attack will lack the precision that made them dangerous. Parker's acknowledgement carried the tone of a commander committing to battle. All defensive forces will concentrate around the main anchorage. This is our opportunity to destroy their offensive capability permanently. As orders flowed through the communication networks, Sarah found herself at the center of a storm of activity that would determine the fate of American forces across the Pacific. Her mathematical insights had evolved from abstract analysis to concrete tactical advantages that thousands of men would depend upon for survival. The hours that followed tested every aspect of American defensive coordination. Enemy forces, desperate to salvage something from their failed coordinated offensive, threw themselves against concentrated American defenses with the fury of men who understood they were fighting for survival. From the intelligence center, Sarah monitored the battle through intercepted enemy communications, watching as their tactical coordination disintegrated under the pressure of American defensive fire. The mathematical precision that had initially made them threatening now worked against them as inflexible plans met adaptable defenses. "Their command structure is fragmenting," she reported to James, who had remained beside her throughout the engagement. "Individual commanders are making independent decisions instead of following coordinated orders." "Which is exactly what we wanted," James confirmed with satisfaction. "Coordinated enemies are dangerous. Confused enemies are defeated enemies." The battle reached its climax as enemy forces made their final desperate assault against the main anchorage. American defensive positions, forewarned by intelligence and prepared through tactical coordination, met the attack with devastating effect. The mathematical predictions that Sarah had developed proved accurate down to the minute as enemy forces arrived exactly when and where American defenders expected them. "Enemy formation breaking off," reported Rogers, her voice carrying excitement and relief. "Survivors are retiring toward their base areas." The victory was complete and decisive. Enemy forces that had threatened American positions across the entire Central Pacific had been drawn into a single engagement where concentrated American firepower could destroy them permanently. Sarah's analytical insight had transformed a potential strategic disaster into a tactical triumph that would reshape the Pacific conflict. Admiral Parker's personal message arrived within hours of the battle's conclusion. "Lieutenant Mitchell, your analysis prevented a potential catastrophe and created the opportunity for decisive victory. The Pacific Fleet is in your debt." But Sarah found herself most affected by the quiet pride in James's expression as he read the official commendation. Their intellectual partnership had achieved something neither could have accomplished alone, creating a professional bond that transcended military hierarchy. "You did something remarkable today," James said quietly, as the immediate excitement of victory began to fade. "Your insights saved thousands of American lives and changed the course of the Pacific War." Sarah felt the weight of accomplishment settling upon her shoulders. The abstract mathematical relationships that fascinated her academically had become tools of strategic warfare with consequences that would ripple across the entire conflict. "We did it together," she corrected gently. "Your tactical understanding gave context to my mathematical analysis. Neither approach would have succeeded alone." The recognition of their partnership carried implications that extended beyond professional collaboration. Something had developed between them during the intensity of crisis, a connection that combined intellectual respect with growing personal attraction. "Sarah," James began, then paused as if searching for words adequate to express complex emotions. "This war won't last forever. When it ends, I hope we can discover what we might be together without the pressure of military necessity." The suggestion carried both promise and uncertainty. War had brought them together, but peace would test whether their connection could survive without the catalyst of shared crisis. "I'd like that," Sarah replied, her voice carrying warmth that had nothing to do with professional appreciation. "Whatever this is between us, it feels too important to lose when the fighting ends." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities and the recognition that their lives had become intertwined in ways that transcended military service. They were discovering love in the midst of war, finding hope for the future within the crucible of present danger. The celebration of their intelligence victory was interrupted by new priority communications requiring immediate attention. The war continued its relentless pace, demanding constant vigilance and continuous analysis of enemy intentions. But something fundamental had changed between Sarah and James during the crisis, a recognition that their partnership represented more than professional collaboration. ATTT. Freed, classified Hearts, November. Arrived with the tropical rainstorms that marked Hawaii's winter season, transforming Pearl Harbor into a landscape of mist and moisture that seemed to mirror the emotional complexity developing between Sarah and James. Their professional success had elevated their status within the intelligence community, but it had also intensified the personal connection that neither could ignore. The intelligence center buzzed with new urgency as American forces prepared for the next phase of Pacific operations. Sarah's analytical triumph had established her reputation as one of the Navy's most capable cryptographic officers, leading to assignments of increasing complexity and importance. Lieutenant Mitchell, Commander Harrison addressed her formally as other personnel worked around them, maintaining military propriety, while his eyes conveyed warmth that had nothing to do with official business. "Admiral Parker has requested your analysis of intercepted communications regarding enemy defensive preparations in the Marshall Islands." The assignment represented another step forward in the Pacific offensive, with American forces preparing to assault heavily fortified enemy positions. Sarah's cryptographic insights would help determine tactical approaches that could minimize American casualties while maximizing operational effectiveness. "I'll begin immediately." "Commander," Sarah replied, matching his formal tone while allowing her own eyes to reflect the growing affection that had developed between them. Their relationship had evolved into something unique within the military structure, a partnership that combined professional excellence with personal attraction, creating dynamics that both enhanced their effectiveness and complicated their interactions. They had learned to communicate through subtle gestures and meaningful glances, conducting an emotional conversation beneath the surface of military protocol. The Marshall Islands intercepts revealed enemy preparations for desperate defensive measures, Fortifications had been strengthened, garrison forces reinforced, and defensive coordination improved based on lessons learned from their recent defeats. The enemy was adapting to American intelligence advantages, creating new challenges for cryptographic analysis. "They're changing their communication patterns," Sarah reported to James during one of their evening briefings, when the intelligence center emptied of most personnel and they could speak more freely. "The mathematical structures I used to predict their coordination are being modified." James studied the frequency analyses with the intensity of a commander who understood that adaptive enemies posed the greatest threats. "How does this affect our operational planning?" "It means we need to evolve our analytical approaches," Sarah explained, her excitement evident despite the challenges. "They're learning from their defeats, which forces us to stay ahead of their adaptations." The intellectual challenge energized Sarah in ways that reminded her why she had been drawn to mathematics originally. The enemy's efforts to frustrate American intelligence created complex problems that demanded innovative solutions. She was fighting a war of minds across the Pacific, matching her analytical capabilities against enemy cryptographers who understood the stakes as clearly as she did. "There's something else," Sarah continued, her voice carrying uncertainty that had nothing to do with professional analysis. "I've been receiving hints about potential reassignment. My work here has attracted attention from other commands." The possibility of separation struck James with unexpected force. Their partnership had become central to both their professional effectiveness and personal happiness. The thought of continuing the war without Sarah beside him seemed somehow incomplete. "Where?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled despite the emotional turmoil her news created. "Washington," Sarah replied quietly. "The Navy Department wants to establish a new cryptographic center focused on strategic intelligence analysis. They've requested my transfer to head the mathematical analysis section." The opportunity represented professional advancement that few officers could hope to achieve. Strategic intelligence work in Washington would place Sarah at the center of American intelligence operations, with influence over global military planning. It was recognition of her capabilities that should have filled her with satisfaction. Instead, she found herself contemplating the cost of success. Advancement meant leaving Pearl Harbor, leaving the intelligence center where she had made her reputation, and leaving James. The personal sacrifices demanded by professional achievement seemed suddenly too high. "When?" James's question carried the weight of a man trying to calculate how much time remained before their world changed forever. "Orders haven't been cut yet," Sarah explained, "but the preliminary discussions suggest implementation within the next month." The timeline created urgency that transformed their relationship dynamics. Knowing that separation loomed ahead forced them to confront emotions they had been developing gradually. The luxury of time for their connection to evolve naturally was being stripped away by military necessity. "Sarah," James said softly, abandoning military formality in recognition of the moment's significance. "There's something I need to tell you before circumstances make it impossible." The intelligence center was nearly empty, with only the skeleton crew monitoring routine communications. The harsh fluorescent lights had been dimmed for the evening shift, creating an atmosphere of intimacy within the military setting that had brought them together. "I need to tell you too," Sarah replied, her voice carrying emotions that had been building for weeks. They moved away from the main work area toward the small briefing room where they had first collaborated on the enemy coordination analysis. The space held memories of their intellectual partnership, but now it would witness something more personal. "I've been trying to understand what's happening between us," James began, his usual command certainty replaced by emotional vulnerability. "This war has turned everything upside down, brought together people who never would have met in peacetime. But what I feel for you transcends the circumstances that introduced us." Sarah felt her heart racing as he voiced the emotions she had been experiencing but hadn't dared to express. The military environment discouraged personal attachments that might compromise professional judgment. Yet, their connection had enhanced rather than hindered their effectiveness. "I feel it too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every morning I wake up looking forward to working beside you. Every evening I hope for a few minutes when we can drop the military formality and just be ourselves together." The acknowledgement hung between them like a bridge across the chasm of military protocol. They were admitting to emotions that could complicate their professional lives while recognizing that those emotions had become too powerful to ignore. James reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object wrapped in military-issue cloth. "This belonged to my father," he said, unwrapping a silver compass with intricate engravings around its face. "He carried it through the Great War, said it always brought him home safely." The compass gleamed in the dim light, its needle pointing steadily toward magnetic north, despite the metal surroundings of the intelligence center. The craftsmanship spoke of an earlier era when such instruments were created with care and attention to detail rather than mass-produced efficiency. "I want you to have it," James continued, pressing the compass into Sarah's palm. "Not just as a keepsake, but as a promise. When this war ends, when we can make choices about our lives instead of following military orders, I want to find you again." The weight of the compass seemed to carry the significance of his words. Sarah understood that he was offering more than a gift. He was expressing faith in a future beyond war, hope that their connection could survive separation and uncertainty. "James," she whispered, her fingers closing around the compass, "I've been assigned to analyze enemy strategic communications, but the only future I really want to decode is one that includes you." The moment crystallized around them, two people acknowledging love in the midst of global conflict. Their professional partnership had evolved into something deeper and more enduring than the war that had brought them together. Before either could say more, the urgent chatter of the communications equipment demanded their attention. Priority intercepts were incoming, requiring immediate cryptographic analysis. The war had again interrupted their personal moment, reminding them that duty demanded constant vigilance, but something fundamental had changed between them. The compass in Sarah's hand represented a tangible connection that would endure beyond temporary separation. They had found love within the machinery of war, discovered hope for the future while fighting battles in the present. The incoming intercepts revealed enemy preparations for a desperate counteroffensive designed to regain initiative in the Pacific theater. As Sarah bent over the mathematical analysis that would determine American tactical responses, she was acutely aware of James beside her. Their intellectual partnership now enhanced by emotional connection. "They're planning something significant," Sarah reported as patterns emerged from the encrypted communications. Multiple operational groups coordinating across vast distances, but this time their mathematical relationships are different. The enemy had learned from their previous defeats, adapting their coordination methods to frustrate American intelligence advantages. Sarah found herself engaged in a complex mathematical duel with enemy cryptographers who understood that communication security represented the foundation of operational success. "How much time do we have?" James asked, his tactical experience informing his assessment of the intelligence implications. "Based on the transmission scheduling patterns, implementation within 10 days, Sarah calculated. But their new coordination methods make target prediction more difficult. The challenge energized her analytical capabilities while highlighting the personal stakes involved in their work. Every successful intelligence breakthrough potentially shortened the war, bringing closer the day when personal considerations could take precedence over military necessity. Working together through the night, Sarah and James decoded the enemy's new operational plan, a coordinated strike designed to sever American supply lines while drawing defending forces into unfavorable tactical positions. The mathematical elegance of the enemy plan impressed Sarah even as she worked to frustrate its Implementation. They've learned from our previous success, she admitted with grudging respect for her unknown opponents. The coordination is more flexible, less vulnerable to disruption through timing manipulation. Which means we need different countermeasures, James observed, his strategic thinking adapting to the new intelligence parameters. Their analytical partnership reached new levels of effectiveness as personal trust enhanced professional collaboration. They had learned to anticipate each other's thought processes, creating a synergy that produced insights neither could have achieved alone. As dawn broke over Pearl Harbor, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that reminded them of the beauty that existed beyond war, Sarah and James completed their analysis of the enemy threat. Their recommendations would shape American defensive preparations across the Pacific theater, potentially determining the outcome of the next major engagement. Another successful night's work, James observed with satisfaction, though his expression carried awareness that their time together was measured in days rather than months. Our last collaboration here, Sarah replied, touching the compass he had given her. My transfer orders arrived during the night shift. The news struck them both with the finality of military efficiency. Bureaucratic decisions made in distant Washington would separate them within days, ending a partnership that had achieved remarkable success while nurturing hope for personal happiness. When? James asked, though his expression suggested he already understood the answer. Day after tomorrow, Sarah confirmed. Transport to San Francisco, then cross-country train to Washington. I'll be briefing the Navy Department on Pacific intelligence operations before assuming duties at the new Strategic Analysis Center. The timeline left little opportunity for extended farewells or romantic gestures. Military necessity demanded efficient transitions that ignored personal attachments. They would have to compress their emotional goodbye into whatever brief moments they could steal from official duties. Then we need to make these last 2 days count, James said, with determination that reminded Sarah why she had been initially attracted to his combination of strength and gentleness. C. Warfo. Departures and promises, the final 48 hours at Pearl Harbor passed with surreal intensity. As Sarah completed her intelligence duties while preparing for the transition that would reshape her life completely. The cryptographic center buzzed with the usual urgency of war, but everything felt different, knowing that her time in this place, and with James, was measured in hours. Admiral Parker summoned Sarah for a final briefing that served as both professional evaluation and personal recognition. His office, overlooking the harbor where American naval power was being rebuilt and strengthened, provided a panoramic view of the strategic significance of their intelligence work. Lieutenant Mitchell. Parker began with the formality that marked important military communications. Your service at Station Hypio has been exemplary. The intelligence breakthroughs you've achieved have directly influenced major tactical decisions and saved countless American lives. The Admiral's praise carried weight that Sarah would remember throughout her career, but she found herself thinking primarily about the partnership with James that had made those breakthroughs possible. Your new assignment in Washington represents recognition of your unique capabilities, Parker continued. Strategic intelligence analysis at the Navy Department level will place you at the center of global operations planning. It's an opportunity few officers ever receive. I'm honored by the confidence placed in me. Admiral, Sarah replied with appropriate formality, though her emotions remained focused on the personal costs of professional advancement. Parker's expression softened slightly, revealing the human understanding that lay beneath his command authority. I know this assignment means leaving behind professional relationships that have proven highly effective. Commander Harrison speaks very highly of your collaborative work. The reference to James sent a flutter through Sarah's chest. Military protocol discouraged personal attachments, but successful partnerships were recognized and valued within the professional structure. Our work together has been highly productive, sir, Sarah managed, trying to keep personal emotions out of her professional voice. "Indeed it has," Parker confirmed, "which is why I'm recommending that Commander Harrison be assigned to liaison duties with the Washington Intelligence Center. His tactical experience combined with your analytical capabilities could prove valuable at the strategic level." The unexpected possibility struck Sarah like lightning. If James received assignment to Washington, their separation might be temporary rather than permanent. Their professional partnership could continue while providing opportunities for their personal relationship to develop. "That would be beneficial to operational effectiveness, Admiral," Sarah said carefully, trying to maintain military composure while her heart raced with hope. Parker's slight smile suggested he understood the full implications of his suggestion. "Military effectiveness is always our primary concern, Lieutenant. Personal compatibility between intelligence, personnel enhances professional productivity." The admirals, diplomatic phrasing acknowledged, the reality of their relationship without forcing official recognition of emotions that fell outside military regulations. It was the kind of understanding that allowed professional and personal considerations to coexist within the military structure. "Your final briefing is scheduled for 1400 hours, Parker concluded. "Make sure your analytical files are properly transferred to ensure continuity of operations." As Sarah left the Admiral's office, she felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety about the possibility of continuing her partnership with James in Washington. Professional advancement, combined with personal hope, created a sense of anticipation she hadn't experienced since receiving her original assignment to Pearl Harbor. The afternoon briefing brought together the entire intelligence team for Sarah's final operational summary. As she presented her analysis of current enemy capabilities and likely future developments, she was acutely aware of James watching from the back of the room with an expression that combined professional pride and personal affection. "Enemy cryptographic. Security has improved significantly since our major intelligence breakthrough," Sarah reported to the assembled officers. "They've modified communication procedures, altered coordination methods, and implemented new security protocols designed to frustrate our analytical approaches." Assessment reflected the reality of intelligence. Warfare, success bred countermeasures that demanded constant adaptation and innovation. American cryptographic advantages were temporary assets that required continuous development to maintain effectiveness. However, Sarah continued, the fundamental mathematical relationships underlying their communication systems remain vulnerable to sophisticated analysis. Future intelligence operations should focus on these structural weaknesses rather than procedural variations. Her recommendations would guide Pacific intelligence operations for months to come, ensuring that her analytical insights continued influencing the war effort long after her departure from Pearl Harbor. Following the briefing, James approached her with the casual demeanor that had become their method of conducting personal conversations within the military environment. "Outstanding presentation," he said formally, then added quietly, "Admiral Parker mentioned possible liaison assignments to Washington." The hope in his voice matched Sarah's own emotions. The possibility of continuing their partnership provided a lifeline across the chasm of military separation. "Nothing confirmed yet," Sarah replied carefully, aware that other personnel remained within hearing distance. "But strategic intelligence coordination between Pacific operations and Washington planning could prove beneficial." Their coded conversation danced around emotions and hopes that military protocol prevented them from expressing directly, yet both understood that forces beyond their control might provide opportunities for their relationship to continue developing. That evening, as Sarah packed her personal belongings for the journey to Washington, James appeared at her quarters, with a bottle of wine and sandwiches from the officers' mess. "Thought you might appreciate a proper farewell dinner," he said, with the slight smile that had attracted her from their first meeting. The gesture was both romantic and practical, providing them with time alone together without violating any specific military regulations. They had learned to find intimacy within the constraints of military life. They walked to a secluded area of the base, where they could watch the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. The natural beauty provided a backdrop that reminded them of the world that existed beyond war and military necessity. "I keep thinking about what might have been if we'd met in peacetime," Sarah said, as they shared the simple meal. "Would we have found each other without the war to bring us together?" James considered the question seriously, understanding that it reflected deeper concerns about the foundation of their relationship. "I think we would have," he said finally. "Maybe not as quickly, maybe not under such intense circumstances, but I believe we would have recognized something special between us." The assurance provided comfort for Sarah's unspoken worry that their connection depended entirely upon the extraordinary circumstances of war. She needed to believe that what they had discovered together could survive the transition to peacetime. "The compass will help me find my way back to you," she said, touching the silver instrument that had become the symbol of their commitment to each other. "It's not about finding your way back," James corrected gently. "It's about both of us moving forward toward whatever comes next, together." The distinction carried profound implications for how they viewed their relationship. Rather than clinging to what they had shared at Pearl Harbor, they were choosing to embrace an uncertain future with faith that their connection would adapt and strengthen. As full darkness settled over the Pacific, they made their way back toward the main base area. The evening had provided closure for their time together at Pearl Harbor while opening possibilities for their future relationship. "Whatever happens in Washington, whatever assignments we receive, what we've discovered together is real," James said, as they paused outside Sarah's quarters. "I know," Sarah replied, her voice carrying certainty that had replaced earlier anxieties. "This isn't just wartime romance. This is something that will endure." The kiss they shared was gentle but filled with promise, expressing emotions that words couldn't adequately convey. They were saying goodbye to one phase of their relationship while expressing faith in whatever would come next. 5. Strategic love. The transport aircraft carrying Sarah across the Pacific toward her new assignment in Washington provided hours of reflection on the transformation that military service had brought to her life. As the islands of Hawaii disappeared beneath the clouds, she held James's compass and contemplated the journey that had carried her from academic mathematics to intelligence, warfare to love discovered in the midst of global conflict. San Francisco appeared through the aircraft window like a dream of peacetime prosperity, its skyline unmarked by war, despite the military activity that filled its harbors and airfields. The city represented the American home front, the society and values that gave meaning to their military service. The cross-country train journey to Washington allowed Sarah to observe a nation, mobilized for war, but retaining the essential character that distinguished American society from its enemies. Farmers worked fields that fed both civilian and military populations. Factory workers produced the weapons and supplies that sustained global operations. Children attended schools that preserved hope for a future beyond conflict. Washington in December 1943 pulsed with the energy of a capital directing global warfare. The massive government buildings housed thousands of personnel coordinating operations across multiple theaters while planning for challenges that lay ahead. Sarah's new assignment placed her at the heart of American strategic planning. The Navy Department's new Strategic Intelligence Analysis Center occupied an entire floor of a building that had been rapidly constructed to house the expanded intelligence bureaucracy. Sarah's office provided her with access to intercept traffic from every theater of operations, creating analytical opportunities that dwarfed her previous work at Pearl Harbor. Commander Elizabeth Morrison, the center's director, briefed Sarah on her new responsibilities during her first morning in Washington. Morrison, A former academic who had been commissioned specifically for intelligence work understood the unique challenges facing military analysts with civilian backgrounds. Your work at Pearl Harbor demonstrated exceptional analytical capability, Morrison noted. Here, you'll be applying those same skills to strategic rather than tactical problems. Instead of predicting enemy operations in a single theater, you'll be analyzing global patterns that influence overall war strategy. The scope of the assignment was both exciting and daunting. Sarah would be working with intelligence from the Atlantic and Mediterranean theaters, as well as the Pacific, searching for strategic patterns that might not be apparent to analysts focused on specific regional operations. Your first major project involves enemy strategic coordination, Morrison continued. We have evidence suggesting improved coordination between German and Japanese operations, but the mathematical relationships are too complex for traditional analysis methods. The challenge represented exactly the kind of problem that attracted Sarah's analytical instincts. Enemy strategic coordination implied sophisticated planning that could threaten American operations across multiple theaters simultaneously. I'll need access to intercept traffic from all theaters, Sarah requested, already beginning to formulate analytical approaches to the problem. Already arranged, Morrison confirmed. You'll also be working with liaison officers from other services and allied intelligence agencies. This is joint and combined analysis at the highest level. As Sarah settled into her new position, she found herself missing the intimate collaboration that had characterized her work with James at Pearl Harbor. The Washington environment was more formal, more bureaucratic, less personal than the frontline atmosphere that had allowed their relationship to develop. But 10 days after her arrival, as she worked late in her office analyzing intercept patterns from the European theater, a familiar voice interrupted her concentration. "Working late again, Lieutenant?" Commander James Harrison stood in her doorway, carrying himself with the same mixture of authority and warmth that had attracted her at Pearl Harbor. Sarah's heart leaped with joy and surprise. "James, what are you doing here?" "Liaison assignment," he replied with the smile that had become precious to her. "Seems the Navy Department decided that Pacific tactical experience might prove valuable for strategic planning purposes." Admiral Parker's suggestion had materialized into reality, bringing James to Washington just as Sarah was beginning to feel isolated in her new assignment. Their professional partnership could continue while providing opportunities for their personal relationship to flourish. "I was hoping," James continued, "that you might have time for dinner with a fellow Pacific veteran. I know a place that serves something resembling actual food rather than military rations." The invitation represented more than a meal. It was an opportunity to re-establish their connection. Within their new environment, Sarah realized that her happiness in Washington would depend largely on whether their relationship could adapt to different circumstances. "I'd love that," she replied, her voice carrying warmth that had been missing from her interactions since leaving Pearl Harbor. The restaurant James had chosen was small and intimate, the kind of place where conversations could remain private despite the presence of other diners. The atmosphere provided a stark contrast to the military settings where their relationship had developed. "How are you adjusting to strategic analysis?" James asked as they shared a bottle of wine that represented luxury after months of military restrictions. "The scope is fascinating," Sarah replied honestly. "Access to global intelligence creates analytical opportunities that didn't exist at Pearl Harbor. But I miss the immediate tactical impact of our work there." James understood her sentiment. Strategic planning lacks the urgency of tactical operations, but the influence is broader, potentially affecting the entire war effort rather than individual battles. Their conversation moved naturally from professional matters to personal concerns, touching on the adjustments they were both making to life in Washington. The city offered cultural opportunities unavailable at military bases, but it also imposed social conventions that complicated their relationship. "Military regulations regarding fraternization are more strictly enforced here," James observed with regret. our professional collaboration is accepted, but personal relationships face more scrutiny. The reality of Washington protocols created challenges they hadn't encountered at Pearl Harbor, where combat conditions had relaxed many peacetime restrictions. Their relationship would need to develop more discreetly while maintaining the professional effectiveness that justified their continued partnership. "Then we'll be more careful," Sarah said with determination. "What we have is too important to lose because of bureaucratic concerns." As their relationship adapted to Washington's constraints, their professional collaboration reached new levels of effectiveness. The Enemy Strategic Coordination Project provided them with opportunities to combine tactical experience from the Pacific with access to global intelligence networks. The mathematical patterns suggest coordination beyond anything we've seen previously, Sarah reported during one of their evening briefings. German and Japanese operations are synchronized at the strategic level, implying planning mechanisms that transcend geographic separation. James studied the frequency analyses that supported her conclusions. "What kind of coordination? Tactical timing or strategic objectives?" "Both," Sarah replied with excitement that reflected her analytical satisfaction. "They're coordinating major operations to achieve cumulative strategic effects. When German forces engage Allied attention in Europe, Japanese forces exploit the distraction to achieve Pacific objectives." The discovery had profound implications for Allied planning. If enemy forces were coordinating strategically, Allied responses needed similar coordination to prevent being defeated piecemeal across multiple theaters. "Recommended countermeasures?" James asked, his tactical thinking already working through the implications. "Allied strategic coordination," Sarah replied immediately. "Match their strategic cooperation with our own. Coordinate major operations between theaters to achieve cumulative effects that exceed the sum of individual campaigns." Their recommendation reached the highest levels of Allied planning, influencing decisions about the timing and scope of major operations in both European and Pacific theaters. Sarah's analytical insights, enhanced by James's tactical experience, were shaping grand strategy rather than individual battles. The professional success strengthened their personal bond while creating new pressures on their relationship. Recognition of their capabilities led to increased responsibilities that demanded longer hours and more intense focus. The war's demands were expanding even as their personal needs were growing. "Sometimes I wonder if we're losing ourselves in the work," Sarah confided during one of their rare quiet evenings together. "The war demands everything we have to give. But what happens to us as people?" James understood her concern. "We're fighting for the right to have normal lives when this ends. But we can't live those normal lives until the fighting is finished." The tension between personal fulfillment and military duty reflected the broader challenge facing their entire generation. They were sacrificing immediate happiness for the possibility of future peace, gambling present relationships on unknown post-war opportunities. "After the war," James said quietly, "we'll have time to discover who we are together without the pressure of military necessity. Until then, we hold on to what we have and trust that it's strong enough to survive." The promise provided hope that sustained them through the increasing pressures of their strategic analysis work. As 1944 dawned with preparations for major Allied offensives in both theaters, Sarah and James found themselves at the center of planning that would determine the war's ultimate outcome. Spring 1944 brought an acceleration of Allied operations that placed enormous demands on strategic intelligence analysis. The approaching D-Day landings in Europe required precise coordination with Pacific operations to prevent enemy forces from reinforcing either theater. Sarah and James found themselves working 18-hour days as their analysis influenced the timing and scope of operations that would determine the war's outcome. The pressure was immense, but their partnership had evolved to handle complexity that neither could have managed alone. Their professional effectiveness had reached levels that impressed even senior commanders, who remained skeptical of unconventional analytical approaches. The enemy strategic coordination patterns are breaking down. Sarah reported during a high-level briefing attended by representatives from all allied services. The mathematical relationships that characterized their previous cooperation have become irregular and inconsistent. General George Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff, leaned forward with interest. What does this mean for our planning? It means they're operating under increasing pressure, James explained, his tactical experience informing his interpretation of Sarah's analysis. Strategic coordination requires resources and communication capabilities they may no longer possess. Sarah nodded agreement. The mathematical patterns suggest they're reverting to independent theater operations rather than coordinated global strategy. This creates opportunities for us to achieve decisive results through concentrated pressure in one theater while maintaining defensive positions elsewhere. The briefing represented the culmination of months of analytical work that had started with her investigation of Pacific coordination and evolved into global strategic assessment. Their insights were now influencing decisions that would affect millions of lives across multiple continents. Following the briefing, Admiral Parker, who had been promoted to head of Navy strategic planning, approached them with an expression that combined professional satisfaction and personal understanding. "Outstanding work, both of you," he said formally, then added quietly, "I understand congratulations may be in order for more than professional achievements." The comment confused Sarah until she noticed James's nervous expression and realized that something significant was about to happen. "Admiral," James began with uncharacteristic hesitancy, "I've requested permission to ask Lieutenant Mitchell to marry me. Given our professional partnership and the importance of our work, I wanted to ensure there would be no objections from command authority." Sarah's heart stopped as she realized that James was proposing marriage through military channels, seeking official approval for their relationship to evolve beyond professional collaboration. "Permission granted, Commander," Parker replied with a smile that revealed his personal investment in their happiness. "The Navy has no objection to marriages between personnel of compatible rank and function, particularly when the professional relationship enhances rather than compromises operational effectiveness." James turned to Sarah with an expression that combined hope, anxiety, and love. "Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, will you marry me?" The proposal was simultaneously the most formal and most romantic moment of Sarah's life. James was asking her to commit not just to marriage, but to a future that would combine their professional capabilities with their personal devotion. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, absolutely yes." The kiss that followed was witnessed by Admiral Parker and the other officers present, creating an official record of their engagement that would protect their relationship from future bureaucratic challenges. Their wedding, held 3 weeks later in a small church near Washington, was attended by colleagues from the intelligence community and family members who had managed to obtain wartime travel permits. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, representing hope for the future amid the uncertainties of ongoing conflict. Admiral Parker served as James's best man, while Commander Morrison stood with Sarah as her matron of honor. The presence of their military colleagues transformed the wedding into a celebration of both personal love and professional achievement. In the midst of global conflict, we celebrate the power of human connection to create hope and meaning, the chaplain observed during the ceremony. James and Sarah represent the finest traditions of service to country and devotion to each other. The words captured the essence of their relationship, love discovered and nurtured within the crucible of military service, strengthened rather than weakened by the pressures of war. Their honeymoon consisted of a weekend at a resort in the Virginia mountains, where they could temporarily escape the constant pressure of intelligence work and military regulations. The brief respite provided them with their first opportunity to simply be husband and wife without the complications of military hierarchy. "I keep expecting someone to interrupt us with urgent intelligence requirements," Sarah confided as they walked through forests unmarked by war. "They'll manage without us for 2 days," James replied with confidence. "The war will still be there when we return." The comment reflected their realistic understanding that personal happiness had to be balanced against military necessity. They were taking a brief vacation from the war, not abandoning their responsibilities. Returning to Washington, they faced the challenge of integrating their new married status with their continuing professional partnership. Military regulations allowed married couples to serve together when their duties were compatible, but the arrangement required careful attention to maintain professional effectiveness. Their work took on new dimensions as major Allied offensives approached implementation. The D-Day landings required intelligence coordination between European and Pacific operations to prevent enemy reinforcement between theaters. Sarah's analytical capabilities, enhanced by James's tactical insights, were helping to orchestrate the largest military operation in history. "The enemy appears to be expecting major Allied action in Europe," Sarah reported during a crucial planning meeting. "But their Pacific forces are being weakened to provide European reinforcements, which creates opportunities for accelerated Pacific operations," James added. His strategic thinking adapted to the new intelligence parameters. Their analysis contributed to the decision to coordinate D-Day with renewed Pacific offensives, preventing enemy forces from concentrating against either operation. The mathematical precision of their intelligence work was influencing operations involving millions of personnel across multiple theaters. The success of D-Day validated their analytical approaches while demonstrating the value of their professional partnership. Intelligence coordination between theaters had contributed to Allied success in both Europe and the Pacific, justifying the strategic analysis methods they had developed. As 1944 progressed toward its conclusion, the war's end became increasingly apparent. Enemy resistance was collapsing under coordinated Allied pressure, and victory seemed inevitable rather than merely possible. Sarah and James found themselves planning for post-war careers while continuing their current responsibilities. "What do you want to do when this ends?" Sarah asked James as they walked home from work through Washington streets that were beginning to show signs of cautious optimism about the future. "Whatever we do, I want to do it together," James replied with certainty that reflected their deepening partnership. "We've proven that we work well as a team. Why change something that's been so successful?" The question carried implications beyond career planning. Their relationship had been forged and tested under extreme circumstances, but peacetime would bring different challenges that would test their compatibility in new ways. "I've been thinking about returning to academic work," Sarah admitted, "using what I've learned about mathematical analysis in research rather than military applications." "I could see myself in academic administration," James responded thoughtfully. "Using military leadership experience in educational rather than combat settings, the possibility of academic careers provided a vision of post-war life that would utilize their wartime experience, while allowing them to contribute to society through education rather than military service. Christmas, 1944, brought news of German reverses in Europe and Japanese retreats in the Pacific. The war's end was becoming a question of months rather than years, creating new urgency around post-war planning. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," James said, as they exchanged Christmas presents in their small Washington apartment. "Not just the rest of the war, but the rest of our lives." "You will," Sarah promised, touching the compass that had become the symbol of their enduring connection. "We found something that's stronger than war, more permanent than military service." Epilogue. After the storm, May 8, 1945, brought the long-awaited news of German surrender, followed 3 months later by Japanese capitulation in the Pacific. The global conflict that had shaped their lives and relationship was finally ending, creating opportunities for the peaceful future they had dreamed about during the darkest days of war. Sarah and James remained in government service through the immediate post-war transition, helping to establish peacetime intelligence capabilities while beginning their civilian careers. The analytical skills they had developed during the war proved valuable in academic research as well as military applications. By 1947, they had settled into positions at Georgetown University, where James served as Dean of Student Affairs, while Sarah conducted advanced mathematical research in the newly emerging field of computer science. Their wartime experience with early electronic computers had given them unique insights into the potential for automated calculation and analysis. Their first child, Robert, was born in 1948, followed by Margaret in 1950 and Thomas in 1952. The compass that had symbolized their wartime commitment occupied a place of honor on their mantelpiece, reminding them of the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if there had been no war? Sarah asked James one evening as they watched their children playing in their suburban backyard. I wonder, James replied thoughtfully, but I can't regret the path that brought us here. The war was terrible, but it gave us each other. The sentiment captured their complex relationship with their wartime experience. They had witnessed humanity's capacity for both destruction and love, finding personal happiness within global tragedy. Years later, as they aged together and shared their stories with grandchildren who had grown up in peacetime prosperity, Sarah and James would reflect on the lessons their wartime romance had taught them about love, sacrifice, and the resilience of human connection. The silver compass continued to point toward magnetic north, just as their love continued to guide them through all the challenges and opportunities that life brought their way. They had discovered that some bonds forged in crisis proved strong enough to last a lifetime. The courage of men and women like Sarah and James helped secure victory in humanity's darkest hour. Their stories of love forged in the fires of war remind us that even in our most desperate moments, hope endures, and human connection provides meaning that transcends circumstance. If you're captivated by tales of wartime romance, intelligence operations, and the extraordinary people who shaped history from the shadows, subscribe for more untold stories of courage, love, and intrigue from World War II. Each episode reveals how ordinary individuals became heroes when the world needed them most, proving that love truly can conquer all.